My wife thought I was asleep when she took that phone call in the hallway. I heard her laugh, then promise someone that once the house sold, they'd finally have access to everything. What she didn't know was that I heard every word. And from that moment on, I stopped being the husband she thought she could fool. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm 38 years old. I work as a network security analyst for a healthcare company outside Columbus, Ohio. I've always been the quiet type. Not shy exactly, just careful with words. I believe in keeping my promises, paying my bills on time, and fixing problems instead of talking about them for weeks. My father used to say, "A man shows who he is when nobody's watching." I tried to live like that. For 11 years, I was married to Rachel. From the outside, we looked steady. We owned a small house with a maple tree out front. No kids, just a golden retriever named Duke who shed on everything. Rachel worked in real estate. I handled the finances because numbers calm me down. Budgets, investments, retirement planning. Order. Rachel liked excitement. Not in a reckless way. Just movement. People, noise, new restaurants, open houses, long phone calls with friends. I liked quiet evenings. Most nights we met somewhere in the middle. At least that's what I believed. The night everything changed was a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic about it. I had gone to bed early because I had a 6 a.m. meeting the next morning. Rachel stayed downstairs, finishing some paperwork from a late showing. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty. The house was dark, except for the light in the hallway outside our bedroom. Rachel must have come upstairs. I remember hearing the bedroom door creak open earlier. When I reached for the water on my nightstand, I noticed something. Rachel wasn't in bed. The bathroom light was off too. Then I heard her voice. Soft. Careful. From the hallway. I stayed still. At first I thought she was talking to one of her clients. That happens sometimes. Real estate doesn't exactly respect normal hours. But something about the tone felt different. Lower. Intimate. Almost like she was whispering. I closed my eyes halfway. Not asleep. Just quiet. Then I heard her say it. I know. He thinks I'm asleep. My chest tightened. There was a pause. A man's voice came through the phone speaker, faint but clear enough. I couldn't make out every word, but I recognized the rhythm of it. Familiar. Comfortable. Rachel laughed softly. The kind of laugh she used when she was flirting. My hand froze on the blanket. Just give me a little more time, she said quietly. He's predictable. Once everything is set up, it'll be easy. My heart started beating harder. Still, I didn't move. Years of marriage teaches you something strange. Sometimes the truth arrives in pieces, and if you interrupt too early, you never get the full picture. So I stayed still. Rachel shifted her weight in the hallway. I told you, she whispered. He trusts me with everything. Another pause. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. Especially the accounts. The accounts. My mind started running through numbers automatically. Savings. Investments. The retirement portfolio. I heard the man laugh quietly through the phone. Rachel lowered her voice even more. He has no idea. That was when I felt something inside me go very still. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. Rachel leaned against the wall outside our bedroom door. I miss you, she said. A long pause followed. Then she added softly. Once the house sells, we won't have to pretend anymore. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. My wife. My house. My accounts. And someone on the other end of that call who sounded far too comfortable with all of it. Rachel finally ended the call. I quickly closed my eyes the rest of the way. The bedroom door opened quietly. Her footsteps moved across the carpet. The mattress dipped as she slid under the blanket beside me. She lay there silently for a moment. Then she placed her hand lightly on my shoulder. Testing. Checking if I was awake. I kept my breathing slow and steady. After a minute, she relaxed. Within a few minutes, she was asleep. But I stayed awake, staring into the dark, running every word of that phone call through my head again and again. The strange thing wasn't the betrayal. It was the planning, the calmness, the way she said it would be easy. That was the moment I realized something important. Rachel didn't think she was taking a risk. She thought she had already won. And lying there in the dark, listening to her breathing beside me, I decided not to say a single word. Not yet. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. That might sound strange, but after 11 years of marriage, you learn that reactions can't be taken back. Once you show your hand, the other person adjusts their strategy. And Rachel, she clearly had won. So I kept quiet. I woke up at 6 like usual. Showered. Made coffee. Fed Duke. The routine felt almost mechanical, but that helped. Routines keep your mind from running too far ahead. Rachel came downstairs around 7. Her hair was still messy from sleep, wrapped in one of my old gray hoodies. She looked exactly like the woman I'd spent a decade building a life with. That was the unsettling part. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said, stretching. "You're up early." "Big meeting," I replied. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "Did you sleep okay?" I nodded. Like a rock. The lie slid out of my mouth easier than expected. She studied me for half a second. Just a quick glance. Then she relaxed and looked down at her phone. Trust. That word from the night before echoed in my head. He trusts me with everything. Rachel started talking about her day. She had 3 showings, a lunch meeting with a developer, and a late call with a buyer from out of state. Normal things. The kind of small talk married couples exchange while standing in their kitchen. I watched her while she spoke, trying to see if anything looked different. But she looked the same. Same voice. Same smile. Same casual way she touched my arm while passing behind me. If I hadn't heard that call, I would have believed every second of it. Before leaving, she kissed my cheek. "Love you," she said. "Love you too." Another lie, but a necessary one. At work, I couldn't concentrate for the first hour. My brain kept replaying the conversation from the hallway. He trusts me with everything. Once the house sells. The accounts. Eventually, I opened my banking dashboard. I manage everything through a single secure system. Savings, brokerage accounts, retirement funds. Years of careful planning. Rachel never showed much interest in the details. She preferred when I handled it. Convenient. I started reviewing recent activity. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Mortgage payments. Utilities. Normal transfers. Then I noticed something. 3 weeks earlier, Rachel had asked me to help her set up view access to one of our investment accounts. She said she wanted to learn more about finances. I remembered the conversation clearly. At the time, I thought it was progress. Now it felt different. View access meant she couldn't move money, but it did show everything. Balances, account numbers, institutions. Someone patient could learn a lot from that. My stomach tightened, so I started checking deeper. Passwords, security logs, access times. Then I saw it. 2 login attempts from Rachel's laptop at 1:13 a.m. the night before. While I was asleep. They failed because the authentication system requires my phone confirmation. But the attempts were there. Quiet. Testing. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't just an affair. This was preparation. Careful. Methodical. And the man on that phone call clearly believed Rachel would eventually have full access. I closed the banking dashboard. For the first time since the call, I felt something stronger than shock. Resolve. If Rachel wanted to play a long game, I could do that too. That evening I came home earlier than usual. Rachel was already there, sitting on the couch with her laptop open. "Hey," she said casually. "You're early." "Meeting got canceled." She smiled. "Lucky." Duke ran over and nearly knocked me over like always. Rachel laughed. "You spoil that dog too much." I sat down across from her. She turned her laptop slightly away without thinking. A tiny movement. But I noticed it. "Busy day?" I asked. "Exhausting," she said. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something." I nodded. She closed the laptop. "There's a house listing coming up next month," she said. "Big one. Really big." I stayed quiet. "If it sells," she continued, "the commission would be huge." "How huge?" "6 figures." I raised my eyebrows. "That's good." Rachel hesitated. Then she said something very carefully. "I was thinking, maybe we should move some of our investments around before the sale, just to make things easier for taxes and stuff." There it was. The first step. The request. I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of changes?" I asked. Rachel smiled gently. "Nothing major. I just thought maybe we could combine some accounts, simplify things." Combine. Simplify. Control. I leaned back in the chair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. Rachel's shoulders relaxed instantly. "We can look at it this weekend." She smiled wider than usual. "Really?" "Sure." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said softly. I smiled back. But inside, something had already shifted. Because now I knew 2 things for certain. First, Rachel believed I still had no idea. And second, if I played this right, the man on the other end of that midnight call was about to make a very expensive mistake. And the part Rachel didn't know yet was that I had already started preparing my own plan. Saturday morning came faster than I expected. Rachel woke up cheerful. That alone told me something. She was confident about where things were heading. She made pancakes, played music in the kitchen, and kept talking about that big listing she mentioned earlier in the week. Every few minutes, she would circle back to the same topic. Finances, accounts, simplifying things. I just listened. Around 10, she carried her laptop to the dining table. Ready? She asked with a smile. I brought my own laptop and sat across from her. Let's take a look. Rachel opened the investment dashboard I normally used. I had shown it to her once before. Her eyes moved across the numbers slowly. The savings, the brokerage account, the retirement funds. Altogether, it was just over $1.4 million. Years of careful saving. I saw the exact moment her expression changed. A small flash of excitement she tried to hide. That's more than I realized, she said quietly. I shrugged. Compound interest. She laughed. You always say that. But her eyes kept returning to the numbers. Not me. The numbers. Then she turned the screen toward me. So here's what I was thinking, she said. If we move everything into one joint account, it'll be easier when we start making bigger decisions. Like what? She shrugged. Investments. Property. Maybe a second home someday. Her tone was casual, but the request wasn't. Joint control meant shared authority. Transfers. Withdrawals. Everything. I leaned back and folded my arms. That's a big change. Rachel nodded. I know, but we're married, Ethan. She reached across the table and touched my hand. We're supposed to be building together. Her voice was warm, convincing. The same voice I had heard whispering in the hallway 4 nights earlier. He trusts me with everything. I pretended to think about it. Then I nodded slowly. Okay. Rachel blinked. Okay. Yeah. Let's simplify things. Her smile widened instantly. Relief. Excitement. Victory. All of it flashed across her face at once. Really? She said. Really? She squeezed my hand again. You have no idea how much that means to me. I almost laughed, but I kept my face calm. Let's do it the right way, I said. Give me a couple days to organize the transfers. Rachel nodded eagerly. Of course. She stood up, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. Thank you, she whispered. I could smell her shampoo, feel the warmth of her cheek against mine. For a second, 11 years of memories tried to push their way back in. But the sound of that midnight phone call shut the door on all of it. That afternoon, I went for a long walk with Duke. Rachel stayed home working. At least that's what she said. But halfway through the walk, my phone buzzed. A notification from our home security system. Front door camera activated. I checked it. A black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out. Mid-40s. Dark jacket. Familiar face. My chest tightened. I zoomed in. It was Mark Dalton, my financial advisor. The same man who had been helping me manage investments for the past 6 years. And the same voice I had heard faintly through Rachel's phone speaker 4 nights earlier. Now everything made sense. The quiet confidence. The plan. The accounts. Rachel wasn't just guessing about my finances. She had someone on the inside. I stood there on the sidewalk watching the camera feed as Mark walked up to my front door. Rachel opened it almost immediately, like she had been waiting. They stepped inside together. The door closed. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry, not surprised anymore. Just clear, because now the whole picture was visible. My wife, my financial advisor, and a plan that involved both of them walking away with my money. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Duke tugged the leash, impatient. Yeah, I muttered to him. We're going to need a better plan. Monday morning, I scheduled 3 meetings. First, a private consultation with a forensic accountant. Second, a call with a divorce attorney. Third, a meeting with a new financial firm across town. By Tuesday afternoon, every one of my accounts had been quietly moved. New institutions, new custodians, new authentication. Rachel's view access still worked. But what she was seeing now was an empty shell. The real money was already somewhere else. Waiting. Protected. Untouchable. Wednesday night, Rachel came home smiling. She dropped her purse on the counter. Good news, she said. What's that? The house listing I told you about? It's official. That's great. She walked over and kissed my cheek. Then she added casually. Also, Mark stopped by earlier this week. I hope that's okay. I nodded. Of course. She relaxed instantly. He just wanted to talk about financial strategy. I smiled slightly. Good man. Rachel poured herself a glass of wine. You know, she said thoughtfully, Once everything lines up, we're going to be in a really good position. I leaned against the counter. Yeah, I said quietly. We really are. She raised her glass. To the future. I lifted my water bottle. To the future. But the difference between us was simple. Rachel thought the plan was almost finished. What she didn't know yet was that the real game hadn't even started. And in 3 days, everyone involved was going to realize something very important. I had heard everything that night, and I had been preparing ever since. 3 days later, Friday evening arrived. Rachel spent most of the afternoon getting ready. Not for me. That much was obvious. She changed outfits twice, put on makeup she usually saved for parties, and checked her phone every few minutes. Client dinner, she said when I asked. Big investor. I nodded like it was normal. Good luck. She smiled quickly and grabbed her purse. I won't be late. The front door closed behind her. Duke looked up at me from the couch. I checked the clock. 6:42 p.m. Then I picked up my phone and made a call. Everything ready? I asked. My lawyer's voice came through the speaker. Yes. And the accountant? He's here with us. I looked around the quiet house. Good, I said. Let's do it. At 7:15 p.m., Rachel walked into Bennett's Steakhouse downtown. I watched through the restaurant window from across the street. She looked confident, relaxed, the way people look when they believe the future is already secured. Mark Dalton was already inside waiting at a table. They hugged when she arrived. Too comfortable, too familiar. They ordered wine, talked, laughed. From where I stood outside, I couldn't hear their conversation. But I didn't need to. I already knew the plan. Rachel believed the accounts would soon be transferred into shared control. Mark believed he'd be managing the assets personally. Between the two of them, they probably thought they had already won. At 7:40 p.m., I walked inside. The hostess greeted me. Good evening. I'm meeting someone, I said. She nodded and pointed toward the dining room. I walked straight toward their table. Rachel noticed me first. Her smile disappeared instantly. Ethan. Mark turned around slowly. His face drained of color. I pulled out the empty chair and sat down. Evening, I said calmly. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Then Rachel forced a nervous laugh. What are you doing here? Dinner, I said. She glanced at Mark, then back at me. You should have called. I didn't want to interrupt. Mark cleared his throat. Ethan, this isn't. I held up a hand. Relax, Mark. I leaned back in the chair. Actually, this works out perfectly. Rachel's voice tightened. What works out perfectly? I reached into my jacket and placed a thin envelope on the table. Paperwork. Neither of them touched it. Rachel stared at it. What paperwork? Divorce papers, I said. The words landed quietly, but the effect was immediate. Rachel blinked. What? Official filing was submitted this afternoon. Her eyes widened. You're divorcing me? I nodded. Yes. Her face shifted rapidly between confusion and anger. You can't just... Oh, I can. Mark finally spoke. Ethan, maybe we should discuss this privately. I looked at him. We will. I reached into my jacket again and placed a second envelope on the table. This one's for you. Mark didn't move. Go ahead, I said. He opened it slowly. Inside were printed documents. His eyes moved across the page. Then his face turned pale. Rachel looked between us. What is that? I answered calmly. Evidence. Mark dropped the papers onto the table. Rachel grabbed them. Her eyes scanned the first page. Then the next. Then the next. Phone logs. Email transcripts. Security camera timestamps. The late-night call from the hallway. Mark's visits to the house. Every login attempt into my financial accounts. Every message they thought I hadn't seen. Rachel's voice trembled. You were spying on me? No, I said. You were careless. The table went silent again. Finally, Mark spoke. You can't prove anything illegal. I smiled slightly. That's true. Then I slid a third document across the table. But the Financial Regulatory Board can. His expression changed instantly. I continued calmly. This morning I submitted a full report detailing unauthorized attempts to access client accounts. Mark's hands clenched. You wouldn't. Already did. Rachel looked like she was struggling to breathe. What accounts? I looked at her. All of them. She stared at me. But we were moving everything this weekend. I nodded. Exactly. Her face went pale. What do you mean? I leaned forward slightly. Rachel, those accounts you've been watching? She said nothing. They've been empty since Tuesday. Mark stood up abruptly. You moved the assets? Yes. To where? I shrugged. A different firm. Rachel's voice cracked. How much? Everything. Her lips parted. But the investments. Protected. The retirement. Protected. The savings. Also protected. Mark slowly sat back down. The weight of it was finally hitting him. Rachel whispered, "You tricked us." I shook my head calmly. No. I listened. The restaurant noise continued around us. People eating, talking, laughing, completely unaware that an entire plan had just collapsed at a small table in the corner. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. You ruined everything. I studied her for a moment. Then I stood up. No, I said quietly. You did that the night you thought I was asleep. I placed one last envelope on the table. Rachel looked at it. What's that? A copy of the house deed. Her eyes moved across the page. Then she looked up slowly. What is this? The house, I said calmly, was purchased before we were married. Her face drained of color. And legally. I paused. It's mine. Neither of them spoke. I adjusted my jacket. Then I looked at Mark one last time. Good luck with the investigation. Then I turned to Rachel. And good luck finding somewhere else to live. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Outside, the night air felt cool and quiet. My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. Divorce filing confirmed. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. For the first time in weeks, I finally felt something close to peace. But the story wasn't quite finished yet. Because 3 days later, Rachel showed up at my front door. And she wasn't alone. 3 days after the dinner at Bennett's Steakhouse, I was sitting on my porch with Duke. It was early evening. Quiet. The kind of silence that only shows up after a storm has already passed. Rachel had moved out the morning after the papers were served. She didn't say much. Just packed a few suitcases and left. No yelling. No dramatic confrontation. Just cold, angry silence. I figured that would be the last time I saw her. I was wrong. At 6:18 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. Not Rachel's. A black SUV. I stood up slowly. The driver's door opened first. Rachel stepped out. Her hair was tied back. No makeup. Wearing the same jacket she had worn the night at the restaurant. She looked exhausted. But she wasn't alone. Mark stepped out of the passenger side. For a second, I just watched them. Then I walked down the porch steps. Rachel stopped a few feet away. Mark stayed closer to the car. No one spoke at first. Then Rachel said quietly, "Can we talk?" I folded my arms. We already did. Her eyes dropped to the ground. This isn't about that. Then what is it about? She hesitated. Then she said something that almost sounded like a confession. They froze his license. I looked at Mark. His face was pale and tight. The investigation, Rachel continued quietly. They suspended him yesterday. I nodded. That was quick. Mark stepped forward. You didn't have to go that far. I looked at him. You tried to steal my life savings. His jaw tightened. We never moved anything. You tried. Rachel stepped between us. Please, she said softly. We're not here to fight. I waited. She took a slow breath. We just need help. That word hung in the air. Help. After everything. I almost laughed. What kind of help? Rachel looked up at me. We need time. For what? Mark is dealing with the investigation. I'm staying with a friend, but it's temporary. She swallowed. And the divorce, it doesn't have to be ugly. I stared at her. You tried to drain my accounts. That's not what happened. I tilted my head. Really? She didn't answer. Mark stepped forward again. Look, he said, forcing a calm tone. We all made mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. We? He nodded. You overreacted. For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I chuckled quietly. Rachel turned quickly. Mark. But it was too late. I walked a few steps closer to him. You're being investigated by federal regulators, I said calmly. You lost your license. You're about to lose your career. And you think I overreacted? Mark didn't respond. Rachel stepped forward again. Ethan, please. Her voice cracked this time. This doesn't have to destroy everyone. I looked at her carefully. For the first time since that night in the hallway, she looked unsure. Not confident. Not calculating. Just tired. Rachel, I said quietly. You try to build a future by stealing mine. Tears filled her eyes. That's not fair. Neither was the plan. She wiped her face quickly. You don't understand how things got this far. You're right, I said. I don't. The silence stretched. Duke wandered over and sat beside me. Rachel watched him for a second. He still likes me, she said softly. He likes everyone. Another long pause. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Is there any chance we can fix this? I didn't answer right away. I looked at the house behind me. the porch, the maple tree, the life I had built here long before she came along. Then I looked back at her. No. Her shoulders dropped slightly. But I will make one thing easy for you, I added. She looked up. What? The divorce. Mark shifted beside her. Rachel waited. I'm not interested in dragging this out, I said. The paperwork is simple. No shared assets. No alimony. No claims on the house. Her voice trembled. And if I fight it? I shrugged. Then everything from that envelope at the restaurant becomes public record. Her face went pale. She knew exactly what that meant. The emails. The messages. The plan. Rachel slowly nodded. I understand. She turned toward the SUV. Mark followed. But before getting in, Rachel turned back once more. Ethan. Yes. She hesitated. Then she said quietly, You really heard everything that night? I nodded. Her expression shifted. A strange mix of regret and realization. Then she gave a small, tired smile. I should have known. Why? She opened the car door. Because you were always the one person who actually paid attention. She got into the SUV. The engine started. A few seconds later, the car pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. I stood there for a while. Duke leaned against my leg. The house was quiet again. Peaceful. Finally, I walked back up the porch steps. Inside, my phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. She agreed to the settlement. I set the phone down, looked around the living room, and for the first time since that midnight phone call, the silence in the house felt honest again.